A lot of Red Sox fans are frustrated with the current state of the team, and so are we. And we air out some of those frustrations as well as update you on some of the moves that the Red Sox have made in this episode of the Locked On Red Sox podcast.
You are Locked On Red Sox, your daily Boston Red Sox podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back into the Locked On Red Sox podcast. Thank you so much for making Locked On Red Sox your first listen of every single day. I'm your host, JD Ignaszewski, here as always with my co-host, NESN's Lauren Willand. And I've missed this podcast so much. It's honestly been a little bit tough. I'm out here in Dallas, Texas right now, helping out some stuff with Valley Sports, and left and right when I talk to people and they ask me, what do I do outside of my regular work stuff. I talk about this podcast and they go, oh, this last week must have been tough for you. This last season must have been tough for you. And, it's definitely interesting to, hear their perspective of, what they see from in Texas or other states of people that I've met, of what is going on with the Boston Red Sox. But I got to be honest with you, having a little bit of time to, be outside of New England, think about and reflect over how I feel the direction of this team is going, and the excitement level that I'm currently at right now with thinking about the season starting in just a few months. I'm not excited. And I feel like the team is pretty much in the exact same spot that it was in prior to 2021, where it's now bargain diving. And people are bringing up Elvis Andrus. They're bringing up Jean Segura. Not to say Jean Segura isn't a good player, but we're starting to lower our standards because that is where this team is currently at in terms of options that it has to fill in for just a specific middle infield position. And we're not even talking about the rotation. And something that I have really thought about over these last few days is one phrase that I've brought up throughout this podcast. And it's been really interesting to see how my love for Chaim Bloom has really fluctuated throughout my time co-hosting this podcast. But it's in Chaim we trust. And that phrase is really starting to dwindle from my vocabulary. It's something where after 2021, if you were a Red Sox fan, how could you not love what Chaim Bloom did during that season? But after the lack of direction, the lack of locking up homegrown talent, the lack of understandable moves, it's really tough to believe and be excited about this team going into 2023, which we've talked about this offseason, biggest offseason probably in his career. And I think he's fun with the bag.
Yeah, that's the biggest thing is the direction of this team. Like we've said this, what are the Red Sox doing? And it's the moves, they're just like they don't make sense. And Eric Hosmer, when he got DFA'd, I'm like, okay, like I'm not surprised by this move, and this move was probably coming, but why now? Because again, there's no direction that this team is going. You're putting a lot of faith in Costas, and that's great. If he's your guy, he's your guy. But he's been injury prone for the last year. And maybe that's just something it's not going to happen all the time. I hope not anyway. But you're putting a lot of pressure on him. I was hoping that there was some sort of plan to get a right-handed bat, help play first base. I've seen a lot of people on Twitter mention Trey Mancini, which at this point I'm just like, whatever. Like bring in, whoever. I don't care. Like nothing's going to surprise me anymore with this team. It's just there's no direction. And we've said this before. This was the offseason for Chaim Bloom, and it's been bad. And yes, he's getting his marching orders from the front office as well, but I just don't think, and what he did with the Rays was great over those years. You didn't have to build this team like the Rays because this team was already built. This team had the talent. So when you just watch homegrown talent leave year after year, and it's not somebody that's just like, he had a good run here and his time was up. Like it's people, like Mookie Betts, even though that was going to happen no matter who was in the front office. And then Xander Bogaerts, obviously. It's just moves that could have been avoided, not so much the Mookie, but Xander could have been avoided. He never had to get to free agency. That's on them. And there's just going into 2023, I'm like, what's the goal? Because it's not the postseason. You can't keep saying, oh, we're gonna be competitive. No, you're not as the teams around you and specifically in your division continue to get better. Like,
Right.
no, there is no direction of this team. And I think that's the most frustrating part is there's literally no direction and there's no clarity. It's just a bunch of, yeah, we're still, still the off season. There's still the trade market, but there's just no direction. I feel like after Bogarts, they were just like, whatever, we're just going to keep doing what we're doing, keep making moves that don't necessarily make sense at this point in time. So I don't know. It's just a bunch of weird stuff going on right now with the Red
Uh,
Sox.
And I saw your episode talking about the awkwardness of the press conference, and I watched that in the airport. I'd never seen a more awkward press
Yeah.
conference outside of, whether we're talking about the Red Sox, any team. And there was just a massive elephant in the room of the Xander Bogaerts
Yes.
departure. And I felt bad for Kenley Jansen. And to be quite
I did
honest with
too.
you, I put this on Twitter, like the best part of Red Sox baseball in the year of 2022 was his son saying, "Let's go
So
Boston."
cute.
That was the most, I guess, positive or happy I had been
Yeah.
for a long time talking about the Boston Red Sox. And uh, I really like the moves, obviously, of Chris Martin, of Kenley Jansen, of Yoshida. We talked about this, but it's just filling in the rest of those holes and giving fans a reason to feel confident and excited that this team is actually going to contend. And obviously, there's a massive difference between having a winning ball club and actually contending. You can win, you can have an over 500 record, but if you don't make the playoffs, especially in Boston, it's playoffs or bust. And especially
Yeah.
with the talent that this team had not only in 2021 and 2022, but also just overall, and the money and the capital that Chaim Bloom has to work with, there needs to be a much better product on the field. And, one thing that, I've been thinking about a lot is, what I initially said in the Xander Bogaerts departure episode. I'm one of the most positive people Red Sox fans that you're going to talk to. I
That
always
is
try to be
true.
positive and optimistic, but it's coming to a point where it's becoming sad that, fans have to start thinking about some of these players that are at a much lower tier on what is going to really help this team not only be able to win games, get into the playoffs, but ultimately win a World Series.
Yeah. And you said, yeah, it's postseason or bust. Like this is the Boston Red Sox. This is a historic franchise. This is a franchise that has a history of winning, that has high expectations, that people would go to because they want to win. They wanted to be traded to Boston. They wanted to sign with Boston. And it's just there's just without any direction, you don't become a team. Like you're not a team that players want to be excited to play for. If you acquire the talent, I know there's still a lot of off season left, but we're about 2 months away from pitchers and catchers, and we don't have a complete starting rotation. Like there are still so many moves and holes to fill. What's the plan at shortstop? Because it's obviously not Dansby Swanson because he just went off to the Cubs. Good for him. Like, what is the plan? Are you going to move Story over there? Are they trying to kind of avoid that because that was the huge storyline when he signed here last year? That it was just he's Xander Bogaerts' backup. Like, what is the plan? I don't know, and I don't. And you said it. You are one of the most positive, not just Red Sox fans, but positive people. So to hear you like kind of talk how you are, I'm like, oh no, like this is serious. Like Jake is not happy, and we don't see that often. So I think that speaks volumes, just how the Red Sox are, what they're doing, and it's it's I just don't get it. And the press conference with Kenley Jansen, like when you're supposed to be exciting, he's a closer. The Red Sox have a closer for the first time in a long time, and it's just overshadowed. Yoshida's press conference was overshadowed, I think, as well, just with the fallout still and Scott Boras being there.
That was
So
weird.
it
I
it
hated that.
it was very weird, and we did have someone comment saying that the translator over translated, I think it was the term he used, and that he wasn't like 100% like accurate in what Yoshida was saying, especially when it came to the leadoff hitting stuff. But that we trust those translators to do their job, and me not speaking the language, I'm going to trust them. But it wasn't like bad. It was just a little like over exaggerated. But even then, like, he's an exciting player, but it's just overshadowed because now all of a sudden he's the biggest acquisition from the offseason, and we don't know what he's going to bring to the table. And it's just, you have Scott Boras there, who was signing Carlos Rodon to the Yankees right after he did that press conference. He's got Xander Bogaerts, that deal. Like, it's just, and there's always going to be stuff like that, but it's just been so, you can cut the tension with a knife, and there's still so many questions that aren't going to be answered. But they have to, we can say it all we want, they have to do something. There has to be another bigger move or two. But it just makes you wonder, is Yoshida going to be the only big money they spend this offseason? Because if that's the case, we are going to be in for a very long, miserable 162 games. Like, it's going to be tough. And last year was tough, but there was glimmers of hope throughout the season that they turned it around. The offense figured it out, but then it just fell apart after the All-Star break, really. And I don't want to do that again. I said that sounds so dramatic, and we're spoiled as Boston sports fans in general, but it's just like, put a good product on the field. Your fans deserve it. Not even for, people like you and I, that podcast, but your fans deserve it. Your fans bring in revenue. They're always going to. Put a product on the field that's worth going to see.
And I thought it was so cool seeing Yoshida try his best to speak English. That shows volumes, not only of his willingness to adapt to not only coming over to the major leagues, coming over to America, which I've been in New Hampshire for 23 years. I never know what it's like to go from one country to the other. I can't imagine it's easy whatsoever. Not only a completely different league, but a completely different country with a completely different language.
Right.
But the thing that has been really interesting to see people's thoughts on Twitter is when evaluating a Dansby Swanson deal, a Carlos Rodon deal, and with the Bogaerts deal, I think everybody is in consensus that the 11 years was a little bit of a reach. But the one thing that has always interested me, always in baseball, is the money aspect and the value of a player, and does a player deserve value that is placed on him when he signs the contract. And the one thing that I feel like I've done in the past, but I'm starting to semi-change my ways because it's coming to a point where it's semi-desperation of trying to think logically about the value of a specific player. And the one thing that I see a lot of people saying, with Dansby Swanson or Carlos Rodon, that might be a stretch. I don't know if the Red Sox should spend that amount of money. That is where people's mindsets are starting to get wrong. They are the Boston Red Sox, one of the biggest markets in the major leagues. And if we're starting to talk about money and saying that the Red Sox shouldn't spend a certain amount, that is where we're going wrong. We're starting to go down a path that Chaim Bloom is starting to, steer that path. And, that's unfortunate because, money used to not be an issue. And that's why the Sox are winning so much. And I understand smart spending. I'm one of those people that, is a big believer in that. But at the same time, if you want to win, you got to spend money. And so if fans are going to be out there, which I understand some fans might want to spend less than others, but at the same time, if you want to win, you have to be able to spend, and the willingness to spend those 20, 25, 30. And, I'm not saying the Sox need to be the Mets, who are, have over $300 million, overall salary. But at the same time, have the willingness to be able to spend that $25 to $30 million if you want to get a top tier player.
Right. And you have to spend money to get those kinds of players. And it just blows my mind because you said it. This is the Boston Red Sox. This is not the Boston Bruins. When I know it's very different in the NHL when it comes to the cap and the salary cap and everything. But the Bruins are up against the salary cap and they're trying to make their own moves, and they're still, well, not right now, but they have a big contract to work out in David Pastrnak and keeping him around and making sure they do. And all I can think of, I'm like, he's the next Xander Bogaerts. I'm never going to know peace. I'm never going to know peace no matter what team I cover. And, and baseball contracts are very, very, very different than NHL contracts. I mean, the MLB contracts are insane. We know that. But yeah, you have the money to spend, and it's just a matter of, it's not that they can't, they don't want to. And I don't understand not wanting to spend the money on someone like Bogarts. And it's not, they just wouldn't give him the longer term. We know it wasn't the money. Reportedly, it wasn't the money, but you're not going to be able to compete with other teams if you're shelling, oh, we'll give you 18 mil, even though you have offers for like 22, 23. Like, there has to be some sort of compromise there. And you have to be able to shell out money. You did it to Trevor Story. We know you can do it. You gave 90 million. What was it? 90 million to Yoshida. We know they can spend money. We know that. And they're just,
That's the craziest part, though. Is
and
with
they're spending
Yoshida, you're
front
giving him
court.
$18 million, but you can't give Carlos Rodon or Jansby spots in 20 to 25. Like, that's ridiculous.
It just makes no sense. And by the time that they want to make these moves, I mean, time's running out to get people who are not good players, like obviously good players, but somebody who's going to make an impact on your team. Who's going to be your opening day starter? Probably Chris Sale. But who's going to be your ace of that team? You don't have one right now. Are you good? Like, what's this Evaldi thing? What has that unfolded? Like, is unraveled? What is going on? And there's not even like reports. I mean, there's plenty of reports that are being interested, but not. I feel like in players that don't make sense. Like, they didn't sign JD Martinez at the end of the day, but I was like, why would they even like question bringing him back? Like, what? Yes, he's he's one of Dave Dombrowski's best, if not the best, offseason signing, free agent signing, 100%. And he did everything he was asked to do while he was here and more. He was fantastic while he was here. But I'm like, I just don't know if there's a need for him, because he's not good in the outfield. I don't want him in the outfield. Like, there's just too many holes to fill. So I'm like, go get your starting pitcher. Go solidify your outfield. Figure out what's going to happen at shortstop now. Like, that is the biggest question. Because if it is Story, okay, then what's the plan at second? If you do put Kike there, what's the plan in the outfield? Like, there's money to be spent, and money needs to be spent, but it needs to be spent on the right people. Because if you're going to go out there, and no offense to Willie Adames, he's great. I'm sure he's a wonderful person. But when you're going out there like, oh, we just let Xander Bogaerts go, but Willie Adames? Like, I'm just throwing his name out there. But it's mind-boggling, because they can spend the money. They 100% can. They're just choosing not to. And I think they're consciously choosing not to. Like, I just don't think that they'll be like, yeah, we're interested. We'll see how high the price goes. Cause it gets too high, I gotta back out. And it's like, oh my God. Like, it's just mind-boggling. And it's not gonna get any clearer, I think, until closer to opening day, when we know what this team consists of, like who this team is.
Yeah, I hope the clarity starts to become a little bit more broad and a little bit more in our face and not so vague, because that's the one thing that, we're just trying to figure it out, but like we don't know what's going on behind closed doors. But I wanted to get a little bit more into the JD Martinez, the Christian Vazquez signings, and then also the small trade that the Red Sox made to get Wyatt Mills in our second segment. But I just want to talk to you about BetOnline.net first, which is your number one source for sports betting info, stats, news, and analysis. Get the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there, from pro football to college, bowl season to basketball and the World Cup. We've got it all at betonline.net. If you love sports podcasts, which I bet you do if you're listening to this, you can even find those on BetOnline as well. We're always the fastest and easiest way to get your betting info. So head over to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline, where the game starts. So starting off with JD Martinez, you brought his name up, and this is one thing that I had been thinking about, over the last few days. And I was also somebody to remind people. I brought up during the offseason, should the Red Sox trade JD Martinez? And people went absolutely berserk. And, believe me, I did not expect him to have as much of a power decline as he did this past season.
Right.
But I'm at a point right now where if they brought him back to be the DH for $10 million, the 1 year that the Dodgers signed him, I would be okay with that. And the one thing that I was surprised about with some people bringing up, the $10 million, that's a massive overspend on JD Martinez. Well, he made $19 to $20 million last year. Granted, it was a part of his contract. But at the same time, if it's the same thing that we just talked about before. If we're debating over $10 million instead of $5 to $8 million, what are we talking about here? And the one thing that I'm getting to is looking at this lineup, I don't see really any fix in the power production. Not to say that JD Martinez is drastically going to fix something that he did last year, but now that he's going back to the Dodgers, going back with Mookie Betts, going back with his hitting coach that helped him figure it out, I wouldn't be surprised if he goes out there and smacks 25 home runs. And we're sitting here in mid-season and people are like, shoot, why did we re-sign JD Martinez at $10 million? Man, was I wrong? And it stings that it's getting to the point, and I hate saying this word because there's no disrespect to JD Martinez, of the desperation of just wanting to have some sort of excitement towards watching this offense this next season.
Yeah. Like I mean, obviously Tristan Casas, we're excited for that, but it's like this lineup, it doesn't scream threat right now. There's no offensive threat there for the Red Sox. Yes, they have players on that team who can hit. We know this, but they're like I said in the first segment, they're not competing up against these other teams, especially in the AL East that has gotten much stronger this offseason. So I mean, yeah, he'll probably go out there and just like go back to his old ways, right? He'll be like the old 2018 JD Martinez. I don't think that will happen. He's older now, but it's just bizarre. Like you see, I mean, good for JD Martinez, but yeah, if the Red Sox offered him 1 year, 10 mil, I would have been fine with that deal. I don't necessarily think it's an big overpay, but it's just, you see the teams, dude, they're spending the money. They're making their teams better. They're filling their holes. They're getting their voids filled because they're spending money. And it just keeps going back to this. The Red Sox I don't know if they're afraid to spend money. I don't know if they're just like, no, we're done. We're done spending all this money. I just don't get it because we've seen them not willing to spend before. But we've also seen them with Dave Dombrowski era go all out to get the player they want, make the big trade, make the big signing. And it's just, it's like, I don't even know who this Red Sox team is anymore. But, there's, like I said, there's still off season left, but I'm not feeling too optimistic. Yes, they're constructing their roster, but they're not giving Red Sox fans any reason to be really like get amped for 2023.
Yeah, and I think as well, you brought up some of the moves that they made, with Eric Hosmer, with Jeter Downs as well, and the thing that really prompted the Eric Hosmer designation was the Red Sox traded for Wyatt Mills from the Royals, who was a DFA from the Royals, and interestingly enough, looking at his baseball reference, he was actually drafted by the Tampa Bay Rays in 2016.
Yep.
No surprise there. I've brought up this multiple times. Chaim Bloom needs to expand his net of talent that he's looking at. I get it. Wyatt Mills could go out there and be a great depth piece for the Red Sox, but at the same time, widen the net a little bit. It seems like everybody that he grabs has some sort of tie to the Rays. But looking at what he did with the Royals last season, 19 games, 4.79 ERA, over 20 innings. Definitely just going to be probably a depth piece, but who knows? Could come out of nowhere like John Schreiber and, really shove. But, the one thing that, really frustrated me about the Eric Hosmer designation was the explanation for why is he getting designated over Kaleb Ort, Ryan Brasier, or Darwinzon Hernandez. And, I brought that up on Twitter. I had a few people, try and sway me in a different way. But, I watched Darwinzon not only in AAA, but a little bit in the majors. And I saw Darwinzon up close in AAA. They were hitting him all over the place. Like he's nowhere close to a major league pitcher. And, he obviously got blown up when he got called up to Boston. Kaleb Ort can't pitch in the majors. It's just time and time again, he's shown that.
Yep.
Ryan Brasier, we've talked enough about Ryan Brasier on this podcast, but the Jeter Downs thing, I get it. The Eric Hosmer thing, I understand. From what Chaim Bloom said, he said, to Chris Cotillo, our roster isn't complete yet, but as we build our club, we feel it's important to give Tristan a clear lane and that carrying two left-handed hitting first basemen would leave us short in other areas. Given that, it's important for us to do the right thing by Eric and give him time to find his next opportunity. I understand that, but at the same time, why couldn't you try and trade him? Maybe they did. Who knows? But I just want to understand, why is Kaleb Ort still on the 40-man roster? Why is Brasier and Hernandez still there? And why are they moving on off of guys who actually have way more value than those three players did?
Yeah, I actually think it was Mass Live put out a report that they did try. It might have been Mass Live or the Globe, that they did try to trade him and they couldn't find a suitor. So I think that speaks to his value, even though you'd basically be getting him for free. But it's there's just not really a need for him. And I get the move. I understand it. I do. But there's other people, like you said, that maybe are a better candidate than Eric Hosmer right now to be DFA'd. Like Ryan Brasier, like what is he doing? What does he have on the Red Sox that he has been avoiding DFAs like the plague? And maybe he'll still be DFA'd in this offseason. But yeah, Kaleb Ort as well. It's a bummer. It just hasn't really worked out with him. But yeah, why is he on the 40-man? Hernandez, why is he on the 40-man? And you could have easily, I mean, they can still easily make these moves, but it just, the timing of it, it's just, I'm not surprised that he was DFA'd. I'm just surprised at the timing of it, because there's, like I said, better candidates to have taken that position. And I think if they do DFA someone else and it's not Brasier or Hernandez, people are just, they're not going to, even if it was the right move for the Red Sox, they're just going to be like, well, how do they keep staying on this roster? Those three have the biggest targets on their back from Red Sox fans, and understandably so, because they're not good, and they were not good last year. They were Brasier. He good in 2018, and I don't know if good is even really like the proper word, but he had his moment telling Gary Sanchez to get back in the box when he was a member of the Yankees, and it's just that certainly is not keeping him on the roster. And if it is, then I need to have a chat with you with Chaim Bloom in the front office. But and for Chaim Bloom to be like, our roster isn't complete. No expletive, Sherlock. Like, we know that. We've known that. Like, that is, it wasn't complete whether Hosmer gets DFA'd or not. It hasn't been complete at all this offseason. This is not a complete roster. This is not a complete lineup. And that his answer to Cotillo just gave me no more reassurance, no more confidence. And if anything, gave me less, because I'm just like, way to answer the question. And like, obviously, like, he's not gonna come out and be like, yeah, I didn't want beer anymore. Like, got to get rid of him, screw him. Like, but it just didn't make the answer. I'm just like, got to do the right thing, I guess. Sure, I did. I don't think that was the right thing right now. Maybe in a month after you DFA Brasier first, but I don't know. We've asked this question a lot. Well, what are the Red Sox doing? Like, what's the end goal here? Because I don't know if it's a World Series roster. I don't even know if it's a postseason roster. Like, what is the end goal?
Yeah, and as I said at the beginning of this, I'm at that point. I don't even know what to say anymore. And it's really tough, because the people who aren't Red Sox fans are loving this. They're posting the pictures of the All-Star game with Betts, Benny, and JD, Devers, and Bogey, and Devers is the only one who's still here. And it's tough to not be sad as a Red Sox fan, looking back, reminiscing. And we also saw a former Red Sox player in Christian Vazquez signed with the Twins, 3 years, $30 million. I didn't expect the Red Sox to go out and give him $10 million, but that's a great indication, in my opinion, that they're looking towards Connor Wong and Reese McGuire at the catcher position. Could change prior to the season, but just tough to see, another homegrown talent and somebody that, Boston fans love, leave.
Yeah, and he was fine while he was here. I liked him a lot. I think that the fans really loved him. He's a really good person. I know that his family loved Boston too. But we saw that at the beginning of the offseason, the end of the season, they said that they were content with their catchers, and that they maybe would explore, but they were confident in Wong and McGuire. McGuire played fine last year, and I think that Wong has good potential. Hopefully it pans out, but it's just it's I don't know if anyone really, really wanted Vazquez back, like for the player that he is, and like for the offense, the defense. Obviously, he's a very, very good catcher. He calls a good game most of the time, but it's just like you said, another player that has a lot of meaning to this team. The 2018 team is well liked, and how the Red Sox kind of traded him seemed like it almost seemed like they did him dirty. I don't know if he was just shocked or sad, but like that whole thing was weird too. The aftermath and the fallout of that, but it's just another player who's beloved here, who was, like I said, has meaning to this team, and just watching him go elsewhere, and that's fine if you want to upgrade the positions, but it's just another twist of the knife for Red Sox fans when they were like, oh, look at all these teams getting better, look at all these teams signing ex Red Sox players that definitely contribute to the team at some point. Benintendi, Vazquez, Bogarts, obviously. It's just one after the other where you're just like, it's that I posted the meme to the Locked On Red Sox Twitter account with the little guy, and he's just like, do something, like poking like the ground with a stick. And I'm like, this is exactly how I think everyone is feeling. Like, do something of that's substantial enough to get fans excited again, because you're raising ticket prices again. So let's get the show on the road. I don't think it's gonna happen. Maybe I'm wrong. I hope I'm wrong, but like my level of optimism is just like the bar is on the floor. It is below the floor. I don't know where the bar is. I can't find it. It's so far down.
And we try to be as positive as possible on this podcast, but as I said, it's just getting to a point where it's tough.
Yeah.
And everybody who's listening, I bet is feeling the same exact way. I hope that listening to this is semi of a therapy session as much as it is for us. And it's able to help you look at our viewpoints and think about how you think about the team, maybe a little bit differently, or bring some clarity to how you look at the team. But we're going to be continuing to update you about what's going on with the Boston Red Sox, whether it's positive or negative, throughout the off season. We're going to be posting 3 times a week. Very excited to continue to still be, updating you about this team, even if it's not super duper positive all the time. That's the one thing that we always try to do is, when we see a way to be critical, or when we see a way to give our opinion in a negative way, try to spin it in a positive way, in the best way that we can. But at the same time, we love this team, and we just want this team to win, and ultimately win the World Series. And it's not looking like they're being able to build it to that point right now. But as always, greatly appreciate everybody making Locked On Red Sox their first listen of every single day. Make your second listen Locked On Sports Today, the biggest stories around the sports world in 20 minutes or less, plus instant reactions, game recaps, and Locked On's take of the day. Locked On Sports Today is available on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. Also, make sure to follow Locked On Red Sox on Twitter. It's LO_Red Sox. Follow myself. It's at Jake Iggy. And also Lauren. It's 3 laws, Lauren with 4 R's. But greatly appreciate everybody tuning in. We'll talk to you and see you guys next time. But we'll end it how we always end it. Let's go Sox. Peace.